Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. I'm a psychotherapist, teacher, consultant, and most importantly, a wounded healer, living and working in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm your host, Anne Remy. I'm a counseling psychotherapist, yoga teacher, and trauma specialist living in Brighton, UK. On this show, we interview folks in a variety of healing professions, and we discuss the intersectional journey of healing self while caring for others.
But we're not just focused on individual healing, but also healing on the collective level, from white supremacy, late-stage capitalism, and the patriarchy. Thanks for joining us. Countdown, funny faces. Hello.
Hi.
We're going to have to figure out more creative ways to make funny faces because there's only so much you can do with your face.
Jim Carrey would argue otherwise.
Well, true. Okay. I have been corrected. I take the correction. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How are you?
I'm very tired.
Yeah, tell people about your adventure.
So as we've recorded this, or as we are recording this, I've recently returned from hiking in Slovenia for 8 days, which was gorgeous and beautiful. And the reason I like hiking is because, like therapy, it sure does break you down so that you can build yourself back up physically, mentally, and emotionally. So my body is recovering a bit more slowly than my mind and my emotions. So, yes.
Yeah, I really I like breaking myself down emotionally and mentally, not physically. Don't like that.
Well,
don't want to do it.
The body part is so, it's, I'm a mind body person, so the body has to go with it. So respect that is not everybody's thing, but it's helpful for me. And the Slovenia is beautiful. Highly recommend if you're the kind of person who wants to do any solo hiking and you're the kind of person who doesn't want to get murdered while you're doing solo hiking.
Yes.
I can highly recommend Slovenia as a safe, inexpensive place to hike and not get murdered.
Well, I'm going to tell Rich because he was just hiking in Poland. Did not get murdered, but he did not find it quite as pleasant because there was too much action going on. Who knew?
Yeah.
Poland is very busy and there are a lot of bachelorette parties and bachelor parties?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably.
Well, that was news to us.
Were they British bachelor and bachelorette parties?
Yes, that's what he said.
Yeah, that's a thing. There's a lot of cities in Europe. Oddly enough, Bratislava is another one. That one's a lot of, they call them stag do's, the bachelor parties.
Stagged, yes, yeah. I have heard that before.
Cheap towns with lots of alcohol and reasonable distance flights are all magnets for stag and hen do's in Europe for the Brits. Yeah.
Well, now we know.
Yeah.
Well, I was really curious. While you were hiking in Slovenia, did you wear your Team Grilled Cheese t-shirt?
No, I didn't actually. I don't have one yet because I forgot to order it when I was in the United States.
But do you know where you can get one?
Where can I? Tell me.
On tinyurl.com/CWH merch.
What?
We have them for you. Team Grilled Cheese, right?
Yes. And Team Cheese Toasty for those who are cheese toasty.
Can you only order them in the US though? Is this the problem?
I actually don't know. We should probably find that out.
We should find that out. Yeah. And we'll find that out while I tell you about other things you can do to support the podcast. Right. So you can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, which is very, very helpful because it tells other people like, hey, this show is actually worth listening to. Yeah, it makes us feel good too. And Anne has yet to have a review. So this is a call out. If you enjoy Anne as a new host, and I've been having a delightful time with her and listening to her interviews, please say something about Anne on Apple Podcasts. You can also give us stars on Spotify if you want to. And you can actually answer questions on Spotify. I think there's just the generic question, what did you think of this episode? So if you wanted to say something on Spotify, do you have something to say, Anne? Have you found information?
I have found information, but I just wanted to say, if you can't tell the difference between the two of us, you can just say that we're both great. You can indeed order to the UK. So I have been remiss on our own merch. So if you are in this United Kingdom, you can order a Team Cheese Toasty or a Team Grilled Cheese shirt. So next time I go hiking, I can go hiking with grilled cheese.
Perfect.
Perfect.
As we all should. And then lastly, if you want to give a couple bucks to us, because podcasting is not cheap, Andrea and her team are quite worth it. Creative Imposter Studios.
So
Shout out. What?
Love them.
So worth it. But it would be great if you could give me a little money because this is a very expensive venture. So patreon.com/convos with a wounded healer. You can give as little as $1 a month. And if you are in the US and you join, I will give you a little welcome gift. And if you're in the UK, Anne will give you a little welcome gift.
Yes.
Yes.
Sent to you by Royal Mail.
Royal Mail.
Indeed.
So that's patreon.com/convos with a wounded healer. All right. On to today's interview.
Yay.
What did you think? Because you have said that you are not spiritual, and I don't believe it. It's just not true. You just don't know it. So I'm really curious what you thought of my convo with Elena.
I'm going to say this. The moment she started talking and introduced herself, I was like, oh man, we're going to come back to this. I know it. And I will say I have had a couple of discussions with my therapist about this. Oh yeah, this is, because it's a sticking point. And I went and I spoke to her about it. And it was one of the things that I was mulling over while I was hiking in the mountains. It was indeed, because I was like, what is my issue with this? And, it actually came down to the actual word spiritual. And it's not what goes behind it. It's the word itself. And I, because of my own religious trauma and because of some experiences I've had with people who identify as very spiritual, and a lot of that being either problematic in my past or appropriative in my present, I don't have a personally good connotation of the word spiritual. And that is not to say that people who call themselves spiritual are problematic, but my experience...
Raise his hand.
Yeah, right? Probably most people. So it actually all comes down to my own personal experience with that word. And my therapist was more or less like, well, maybe just get over it. And I was like, no.
Or find a new word.
And that's kind of where we landed.
Yeah.
So I'm on the hunt for a new word.
Yeah, I love it.
Because I don't think that I'm going to move past all of the problematic stuff that goes around the word spiritual for me. Or maybe I will one day. Not with that attitude, girl, you're not. But, today I'm not. And so I'm on the hunt for new words. So I'm open to suggestion. If anyone wants to send us some suggestions, very open to some new words. But all that is to say is it's not, I don't automatically judge people who call themselves spiritual. It's just not a word that I personally would like to associate with.
Well, when I think of witchery, I definitely think that if you were alive during the witch trials, you would have been burned at the stake. So I think we belong together in that way.
Fair.
I mean, right?
And this is the thing. I think there's so much, I'm up in the mountains. I'm having conversations with my inner child and my inner teenager and with my ancestors. There's no way that I am not on this team, right?
Right.
I'm on the team. I'm just not using the same team name.
You're not wearing the t-shirts and have the number one hand
I am not
thing.
I'm not wearing the jersey, but I'm on the team. So
love it.
Yeah. So and I think I know other people who practice witchcraft and it seems from my experience it seems to mean different things to different people. So I was really interested to hear Elena's take on it, because I think everybody who's ever said to me, this is what I practice, has had a completely different definition of it, which goes right along with my own kind of spirituality or versus other word. Everyone's got their own word for what that means or own definition of what that means.
Well, and that's just making me think I have another witch friend, because I actually have a lot of them now, which makes me very happy. But there is a BBC... let me get this right. BBC Radio 4 podcast called Witch. And I think it's, there are many, many episodes, 13 episodes. Yeah, 13 episodes of different examples, explanations, different aspects of being a witch. And I just started listening to it and it's lovely.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah. What did you think of Elena? Isn't she like special?
Her voice alone.
Did you feel that?
Her voice alone.
Right.
Honestly, I could have listened to the episode over and over just to listen to her talk. Like,
yeah,
there have been few people where I'm just like, your voice is enough to calm me down. Like, her voice felt like a weighted blanket.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that she spoke was it felt so purposeful that it actually made me slow down listening to it. Like,
oh, I love that.
and that is like that. I don't know that that's ever happened to me before. So
that's very cool.
Her aura came through. Her vibe totally came through. Because I'm going to guess that's probably what she's like in person too.
Yeah. I haven't met her in person. I would love to. We've just been doing online witchery things, and I've been listening to her, and she used to have this witches box where she would like send goodies and stuff every month. So like I have a bunch of goodies that her hands have been on, but yeah, I'll have to do a retreat with her at some point.
Very cool. That would be very cool.
Yeah. Let me introduce her. So, Elena has been a practicing witch for close to 30 years and has woven together experience as a social worker, body worker, and artist to inform her priestess work as a ritualist and teacher. Elena's spiritual path has been rooted in deep shamanism, animism, feminism, and magic. I can't believe I said that all correctly. With studies and initiations in Dianic Witchcraft, Sri Vidya Tantra, and Core Shamanism. The core of her work is to be in deep service to the collective unfoldment as spiritually rooted, connected, and potent witches. Right? Like, that's also just a magical bio. Like, I don't know. I just love her. So I hope everybody enjoys my amazing conversation with Elena Rego.
I hope everyone gets the same vibe.
They will. I think they do. They're into it. Hello, Elena. I am so excited to have you here.
Hi. Me too. This is a good way to spend my day.
Oh,
so thank you for inviting me. I felt honored.
Oh, yay. Thank you. I love when it's like a dual honor. That makes it easy.
Oh, yeah, right? I know. It's just a love fest.
It is. It is. Well, I, will have read your bio to the masses, but I'd love for you to introduce yourself in a way that feels most organic to you.
So I'm Elena Rego, and currently I am the creator, owner, idea source behind the Witches box, which turned into the holywitch.com just recently. So I just completely forgot that.
Right.
I'm still, after 5.5 years of saying the Witches box, it's still a little bit of a transition. And there I teach and facilitate the spiritual deepening of witches is really what I do. Before that, I have had quite a few different careers, but I did my undergrad in social work and I worked in domestic violence. I did. I was a social worker as an undergrad.
Yeah.
I saw that, which is amazing. Yay for social workers. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time in, several lifetimes in domestic violence. I worked in community mental health for a while and then burnt out and I took a sabbatical, and then I thought I can't just sit around. So I went to school for body work and massage therapy, which was supposed to be like a fun break and ended up being an 11-year career. Wow. And now I'm here. So that's sort of been a nutshell. What brought me here, I think, is the alchemy of those two careers, along with my own spiritual yearning for an expression that felt liberating and affirming. And I couldn't find that in Christianity or Catholicism, which was what I was raised in. And so in college, I went to and I took a few feminist classes and women's studies courses, which introduced me to witchcraft. And that just pretty much opened up a whole new world for me. And I like to say that it saved me in a lot of ways. So what I do at the Holy Witch is a combination of my social work, mental health background, along with deep feminine spirituality.
And that's exactly what I feel in your space and so much appreciate.
Thank you for saying that. It's good to be seen that way.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you came to witchcraft through feminism, because I came to witchcraft really largely through anti-racism and the invitation to investigate our own lineages, spiritual practices before colonization. And so Irish is, I'm mostly German, partly Irish. And So I found Irish witchcraft and started doing research there and trying to connect with my ancestral spiritual heritage.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful pathway to find it that way.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, where do I want to start? There's so many places. I mean, I guess like I've definitely had very magical people on before, so I know all my listeners are into it, though. Who knows? I could have new listeners and they're like, a witch. Oh my God, no, that's evil. That's bad. So I'm sure that you get that a ton. So how do you respond when people have like fear of the word witch?
It's just on the surface. A surface answer would be that it's interesting that I'm getting that more now that I changed the name of the business than before.
Are you kidding?
Which is odd. Yeah, 5.5 years as the Witch's Box and maybe less than a handful. And now that it's the Holy Witch, it's a whole different groundswell of people saying things, which is interesting. I don't know exactly what that's about. So it's something to dig into at some point. It depends on who and how that's conveyed. Complete transparency and personal responsibility. There are times when I'm feeling sassy and I don't respond at all and I let them sit in their fear.
Yeah.
And then there are times when, my response is rooted in there's so many different definitions of witches and witchcraft out there. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's really a spirituality of connection. And so I go into that explanation. But this is really about organically inhabiting your space and your world in a way that is connected both with the seen and the unseen. Mm-hmm. And so a spell can be a prayer, can be a mantra, can be a belief system, can be an affirmation. It's different names for what we all do, which is try to create in our lives some sort of connection so that we can have a hand in the life that we have and create for ourselves. Yeah. So I try to go that route. But again, it depends. Sometimes people are really confrontive and judgy, and I feel like not today, Satan, basically. Like, you be with that. You think that about me. That's okay. I was called demonic the other day, and I'm like, okay.
Wow.
You do you, boo.
Wow. The projections.
I'm not quite ruffled. They're a lot.
Yeah.
They're a lot.
Yeah. Well, and the first thing that came up for me as you said, like, oh, you're getting kind of more, I'm going to just call them trolls now. I'm guessing that people could have looked at the Witch's Box, not that this is what it was, but they could have looked at the Witch's Box as like, oh, it's just another fad thing and people are just getting this cutesy little box. And the Holy Witch, I have to tell you, when I got your original email about shifting the company into that, I felt the depth of that and the power. Yeah. And I'm like feeling it right now as I even talk about it. And that's terrifying for people who haven't reconciled with that depth.
No, I agree with you. And I think, and I don't know if I said it in that letter that you're referring to, I went to a retreat. I'm so bad with timing, but I want to say that it's been more than a year and a half ago, where it was a shamanic writer's retreat. And we did a lot of journeying. And part of my work there was to really suss out what the archetype of the Holy Witch was, because she kept coming through. And what is this about? What is this about? And in one of those journeys, I was looking for really well, sexy packaged sound bites in my spiritual spaces, right?
Yeah.
And instead what I got was kind of an ass kicking. I got called out on my egoic bullshit. And the message that came through was, I've been so cavalier and in myself with, I'm totally out, I'm a witch and everybody knows, and I don't have issues around that. And the message was simply, this is just very safe, easy to digest. Witchcraft. It's a cute little box. And not to demean what it was, because it certainly opened a door in a lot of ways. And it was able to really facilitate people who were hungry for transformative ritual. It facilitated that. So not to diminish what it was, because it was 5.5 years of deep learning, but it was still a safe expression. I wasn't really putting it all on the table. And part of, I think, my life path has been, how do I show up in spaces? And is it truth? Is it really just truth? So yes, Holy Witch kind of packs a punch. It's confrontive in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But it was still a surprise, right? It was still very much like, oh, okay, we're dealing with this now. Because I was also feeling very lucky, like, wow, we don't really get a lot of hate or trolling, but that's increased. And I also think that we've been talking a lot about Lilith and who she is.
Yeah.
For women specifically, and that's incredibly confrontive, because now I'm bringing in that piece. So there's that. There's also that.
Yeah. Would you talk a little bit about Lilith?
Are you sure, girl? Because I'll take over your entire podcast.
I'd be happy to have you do a takeover.
So for those who don't know, Lilith was Adam's first wife. And this is in the mythology of what I like to call and what is Abrahamic religions or traditions, which is Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And when I say Christianity, it's, Catholicism. It's that whole, It's an umbrella. And she did not make it into the Bible that we are familiar with, but there are some Talmudic texts where what happened in that story, there was something that happened in that story before we come into the picture, right? Where we read in the Bible that God made Adam and Eve, and then we know that story in the Garden of Eden. So he first made Adam and Lilith as equals. There are different ways of telling the story. There are, various variations. But she and he were supposed to be equals in some way or another, but Adam wanted to exert his dominance, and she wasn't having it. And the most common way of saying this is that she wanted to have sex on top, and he couldn't deal with that because for him, being on the bottom meant he was being submissive to her. And there was probably a lot of other things that she was bothered with in this story, but she wasn't willing to bend or be an inauthentic version of herself, so she left. She bailed. And there's, again, different retellings of it, but in most stories, she leaves, but she's then still cast out, right? So God sends for her, wants her to come back. She doesn't want to come back. And then she's cast out, and her name is wiped from the book of, oh my goodness.
Genesis?
No, the book of...
Oh, yeah, I know what you're saying.
The book of life. Wow, okay. I just completely had a brain fart. From the book of life.
Yeah.
And he turns her into a demon, or he basically completely smears her and calls her a demon, and she is now relegated to a life of wandering and being a demon. In the Garden of Eden, then God tries again and creates a woman out of Adam's rib, who is Eve. And then I'm not going to go into all of those details, but there's a lot to unpack there. But Lilith specifically is both archetype and I think a deity in her own right. She has also been very demonized, but the archetype is, for us, a story that is encoded with the world and life and experiences of women everywhere. That if you have a path of your own, that if you don't subscribe to the traditional edicts of the way we're supposed to behave and be and carry out a life, you're ostracized, you're demonized, you're relegated to the outskirts of life. And we have lived that reality in various ways throughout all of history. And bringing up Lilith, who basically told God where to go and rejected what God had to offer, is, a big middle finger into the face of the patriarchy, right? It speaks to this collective unconscious that we're all fed by. Even those of us who are like card-carrying feminists, who have been around we still operate and exist and understand more the world of patriarchy than we do of liberation. And what she represents is that liberation from a system that we're all in, that we're all very deeply, imprisoned by, and also cultivate. Like I still cultivate patriarchy in everything I do. And it's a big, confronting, constant lesson and unraveling that has to happen. So Lilith's a lot of things. That is probably like her, like an introduction to who and what she is.
She's the original witch.
She's the original witch.
Right? Because as you talk about women, women fighting back, that's witches being burned at the stake, all of the witch trials, that's exactly what that was.
Right.
Yeah.
People who were not standing in that big game, right? Standing outside of the game. Yeah.
Right. What else just came up for you?
Oh God. So many things. Like
it came and went.
Really like, how far do I go with this? She's coming up, and she's been coming up a lot. And I think that, to speak to what we were talking about in the beginning of this is, I think, why people are really responding. It's incredibly confronting. And I think that witchcraft can be many, many things for many people. I've talked about, it can be a very spiritual, very deep, personally transformative path, but it can also just be a technology for creating a life that you want that doesn't have anything to do with personal healing or personal transformation or any of this. But my particular brand of witchcraft requires a deep level of introspection and self-facing that is scary. It's really scary.
And especially in this time where women, trans people, people of color are being so oppressed and so like violent attacks now more than ever, like this energy and cultivating community, right? Like I remember during the election reading something about like witches are coming together to try to like hex Trump and make sure he doesn't get elected. And sadly, for whatever reason, that didn't work because clearly our path was one of destruction in this country that we had to go down for a little while. And I imagine it will continue to destruct for a bit moving forward, but
it's exhausting,
right? It is. It is like, I think it's a really exhausting time to be so aware. One thing that the word that keeps coming up for me whenever I do your work, when I define witchcraft, I think of it as creating an intentional life. Mm-hmm. That word is so important. And I think those of us who are living with intention and choosing to be aware and have the courage to try to create change, we are going to get pushback. We are going to get critics. And the critics, I think, I mean, I don't want to say like, oh, they're louder now than they ever have been in history, but at least in my lifetime, this, and maybe not, maybe when I was growing up in the 80s, it was worse, but the way that social media works now, like there's so much more access to the hate, just as much as there's more access to positive communities.
And weeding through one to see the other is really a challenge. I mean, it's just
right.
I don't want to be on that train and hate on social media because I think that there's been so much good that's come out of this. Mm-hmm. We're making the world smaller in a lot of ways. And I love that we can connect to different people at different times and explore different things, but it's also been a cesspool. And in terms of mental health or even, intentional living, it's a constant challenge, right? To stay away from or to keep away from that kind of energy. It does feel like there are more trolls, but I feel like we're just more exposed.
Yeah. Yeah. When you have a platform, they'll come after you.
Yeah. And that too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that was coming up as we've been talking so far is the relationship to power, because I think that especially for, magical people and anyone with any sort of, leadership role or whatever, to have a balanced relationship with power is so important because there's so many people, I think, I want to say mostly unintentionally causing harm, though obviously there are some people who are intentionally causing, but I think especially in witchcraft spaces, psychedelic spaces where people are coming for help, those places, if we are not in right relationship with power, people can be destroyed. And I'm just curious like what comes up for you when I talk about that.
The first thing that comes up is that it's an ongoing dance, right? Where I go through and I cycle through periods where I recognize my power, then I'm incredibly cringed and uncomfortable by the power. And it's like this ongoing space where I get to practice a lot of compassion, which is not easy, right? Especially since I'm out here really wanting to drive home the idea that and the truth that we all have an enormous amount of power to wield. And it's not something to be ashamed of.
Right.
And it's not something that we need to avoid and beat down and drive into our shadow because, oh my God, it's a bad word.
Right.
Or if you want to be conscious, if you want to be part of a solution, if you want to be part of healing this world, then somehow we have to, this is the lie, somehow we have to get rid of any semblance of power that we might wield in that direction. And so it's both, how do I live this? And how do I truly dance with this in an honest way so that I fully understand what it is that I'm trying to share? But also finding ways where there's this, and I don't like the way I'm going to say this because I want to claim this word for something else, but to demystify the negativity of power and then really have dialogue around what does it look like to wield power that is uplifting and healing and inclusive and something that we can leverage for bringing others with us, right?
Yeah.
And on a much more micro level, I was just writing about this, we suffer so much, especially witches. There are so many witches. We get emails all the time about, I have this thing, I need help. Can you do a spell for me? Like there's this desire to get out of the suffering, to get out of the difficulty. And unless you are comfortable enough with your power to actually claim what you truly desire, you're never going to get out of the suffering pattern.
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of micro relationship with power as well, that we need to be okay with desire for power.
Agency.
Yeah. Sovereignty. And it doesn't have to look like Trump, right? Like this unleashed plague. Just, you know. So it's complicated. It's a complicated dance, but I think it's essential. And it's real. Like we each really are containers for just enormous power.
Well, and speaking of that, so I'll ask my kind of like personal witch question and then sort of like tie it in. So I want to do spells. There's a part of me that feels like, because I've tried to do so much spiritual work and allow my life to be guided by a force greater than me, because my life has unfolded in a way that I never would have dreamed of. And had I tried to craft something particular, I wouldn't be here. So sometimes when I think of doing a spell, there's a part of me that's like, but then you're going against the will of, you know, whatever is meant for you. And I'm trying to find the agency in, maybe it's the discernment of, when do I use my power? Because man, I manifest like a motherfucker. Like before I knew anything about witchcraft, like if I think something, I will get it. So I know that I'm already a powerful witch, right? But I guess I think, you know, if I'm going to do a spell and I'm going to like really try to make it happen, where's the discernment in, I'm putting out an intention for something that I want for myself, or when am I trying to like manipulate maybe my way out of suffering or something, trying to get something from a more like materialistic way? I don't know. I said a lot of stuff, but I know you're following. You know where I'm going. Yeah.
I do that too. I said a lot of words.
Right.
So a couple of things come to mind. There is, I think, and this speaks a little bit to Lilith, this remnant baggage that we have around the divine and the bigger, higher power source, whatever you want to call it, is something that exists outside of you. And that somehow there is conflict between what you want and what they might want for you, whatever that is. And I don't have an answer. This isn't a definitive answer, but this is one of the things that I dance with. I think that that's a very patriarchal way of really understanding our place in this microcosmic soup that we're all kind of one in. Do you know what I mean? We're all interconnected in that way. And so if the desire is there, we do the work. I want this thing, but is it really what I want? Do I have unconscious like inclinations and drives to like sabotage, or is it, you know, something that's fueled by a shadow issue that I'm just not aware of? We do the work. But at some point, it's got to be okay to want what you want, even if it's something frivolous and super superficial because you want the thing. You may not get it. And witches in the space like to bake in things, and you can do this into your spell work, which is if it's to my highest good. Whatever that is, my highest self understands what that means, even if I consciously and unconsciously right now don't have the wherewithal to see that. I want that guy, I want that girl, and oh my God, they're everything. I'm in love. And it's like, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to you. But every part of everything, you know, every part of you is like, I want it. But your higher self knows better. And so then there is that opportunity too to start trusting in, I may not be seeing clearly here, so I'm going to bake this in, whatever's to my highest good.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, I have such a desire, like part of my work in this lifetime, I know that I am here to help people wake up to their own authentic selves and to build more capacity to tolerate who they really are. And yet I find myself in so much pain when it doesn't happen quickly enough. Yeah. So that just came up for me right now. Like the anger that I get, you know, all of the people who are, you know, because if you think like what we're talking about is so not concrete. And if someone listens to it with a concrete ear, right? Because I was also thinking too of the idea of like, did you manifest it or was it white privilege, right? Like we're not talking about like, oh, we just wish on a magical star and then we get whatever we want. It is cultivating a life of intention, vibration with your highest good and the world around you.
Right.
And yeah, like relationship and like dancing with that.
Right. Well, I will say that the relationship and the meaningfulness is something that we opt to add to it. Because if we talk about white privilege just for a second, And there's something to be learned here. I would tell you that people of white privilege, and I'm one of those people, I would suggest that maybe you are as well. We've benefited from this privilege.
Mm-hmm.
We have a higher propensity for getting what we want, not just because the system is set up to reward whiteness, but also because in our whiteness, we just assume that, yes, it's going to happen. And that's a magical ingredient as well. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Right? And so does that make it evil? Does that make it terrible?
Right.
It's just information.
Yeah.
But it can also, and this is where I struggle, and I'm looking for solutions and ways to convey this for those who do not have that privilege, how to transmit that skill so that can be part of their arsenal as well. That assumption of course I'm going to get it. Despite a lifetime of stories and experiences that would suggest otherwise.
Right.
Because it's both. And there's something there that can be leveraged in a way that isn't necessarily bad, but can be liberating for those who don't have it.
That's really deep because I'm thinking about like that internalized racial superiority versus internalized racial, what's the other one? IRO. Oppression, internalized racial oppression.
Yeah.
Right. And the subtle ways, subtle and not so subtle ways that we're white people, or as Resmaa Menakem would say, bodies of culture.
Oh, I love that term.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And belief is a spell.
Right. Without any other story to it, right? Without any other judgment to it. Belief is a spell. And we carry a particular type of belief about the world and the way the world behaves around us. Yeah.
Right. And I think about my clients too, some of my clients who, even though they're white, for whatever other reason, mental health history, family history, their history of not getting what they want. Like I'm thinking of one particular client who constantly feels on the outside and not able to like manifest in relationships. And it's been interesting to watch my reaction because I am a person who has gotten what I've wanted in so many ways, especially relationally, like Libra rising. Hello. Like, right. I make relationships like it's my job, and it is.
I'm a Libra sun. I get it. I know.
Yeah. And I can't, I mean, all I can do is continue to try to ask questions to challenge the belief. And for people like her, it's not just a belief, that has manifested as reality. And there are other choices. There are other options.
Well, and none of these issues exist in its own silo, right? Because there's a lot of pain woven into a lifetime of not having or getting what you want and being on the outside. And that's a real reality.
Right.
So nothing feels concrete. The deeper I get into this path, and I got a Virgo moon, man. I love my concrete, let me tell you, but nothing is concrete. And so it becomes a matter of being able to live in that fluidity of there aren't as many walls here as I'd like there to be for the comfort and safety of just being able to manage one thing at a time. So yes, it's belief. The belief is a spell, but then how do you unravel those beliefs that are constantly being reinforced by the world around you? That is invested in you staying in your victimization or in your oppression or in your small. I mean, it's heavy shit.
Yes.
Heavy shit.
And practicing this work is radical.
Yeah.
Right. And just going back to like the witch trials, right? To just be a woman who has her own choices, who has her own thoughts about what should be done with her body and how she may present herself to the world, right? Like even now, energetically, archetypally, it's radical.
Oh God. And I think that, I think you said something to this effect earlier. I think that we're just so overly sensitive and so overly reactive right now that any example of I'm opting out becomes almost like a lethal threat to those who are just in reaction to, then you're saying that somehow I'm doing something wrong. It's dangerous. It's really very dangerous.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a crazy world.
Well, all this begs the question, how do you feel about the word healer?
I love the word healer. I love the word healer.
As applied to you?
No.
I was going to say, yeah. I was like, that's too easy. Nobody answers that easy.
You're such a therapist.
I know, right?
No, I mean, I love the word healer because of what it implies, because it implies a process. And to me, it's not a definitive, right? It's not the I'm healed and I'm done. It's actually, for me, in my experience and the way I like to teach it, is that it is an ongoing process. So it's not necessarily the result. It's the way we approach and dance with whatever we're confronted with or whatever we're holding. In terms of being called a healer,
yeah, right.
I think that this also goes to, I'm very hyper vigilant around the expectations that I create.
Yeah.
And so to call myself a healer, especially in this, I would have been much more comfortable saying, oh, I'm totally a healer, when I wasn't so forward facing and being seen on a much more public platform.
Yeah.
Partly because once this started, once my business took off and I was out in the space with people and I was offering basically a leadership role in facilitating people's deepening, the requests and the projections that came towards me or came at me out of deep, deep wounding.
Yes.
It drove home just how massive the responsibility was.
Yeah.
And so, yes, what I do is healing in the world, because that's definitely part of the mission. But I have you can't see me, but I have flutters around that.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, and it comes back to agency. And I mean, from what I've witnessed, and I told you before, in other witchy spaces that I've been in, I've seen a lot of mental health struggles. And my interpretation of what I'm seeing is people without agency looking outside of themselves, thinking, if I just get this thing, if I learn to be a witch, or if this witch who's more powerful does this spell for me. It's the same thing as like believing in like Christianity in the way that like, okay, God's just going to take care of me and I don't have to do anything about it. Right.
Exactly that. Yeah.
And go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
My editor's going to keep that in because it's too cute, but you're the guest.
No, I love it. Can I remember? Hold on a second. Oh God, come back. Oh yes. The witchy spaces. I think it is one of the reasons why, and this was in the beginning, this was definitely a resistance issue for me. And then it became something that I completely fully claimed because I understood why I was doing it, which is I won't do spells for you, but I'll teach you how, because your agency is important. The sovereignty that you get comfortable with holding is critical to your own empowerment and your own healing. Yeah. I never want to be responsible for that.
Right.
And I think that other teachers out there in this space really miss an opportunity to really facilitate that growth in their, I don't know, followers, students, whatever you want to call them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, it's a relationship to power, right? If you, at least this is my read of you, is that you've been told you need to bring this thing forward. And so you're doing it not to gain followers, not to get accolades, not to get something. Like, I mean, that's how I feel about the work that I do. Like, I need money to pay my mortgage, but I don't do this because I want to amass wealth, right? I want to do the work that I do because this is what I'm put here to do. And I think I'm seeing, especially where we are with capitalism right now, some people trying to shortcut and wanting, even when it's not like on the surface level, they want that recognition, right? And that's all coming from the wound that's unhealed.
Right. Exactly. And listen, sometimes that feels really good.
Right. Not gonna lie.
Gotta be, right. No, not gonna lie. Really. Sometimes it feels really good. Sometimes it's like, oh my God. I think at least my MO, my strategy around that is to just lead with transparency so that I keep catching myself. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes it feels great. Sometimes it's like, oh, what is that feeding? What is that really about? Yeah.
And like accountability. I'm guessing that you have plenty of people, teachers in your life, right, who can help hold you accountable to things you might not be seeing.
Oh God. Yeah. You don't. I don't know how you would do it otherwise. You know what I mean?
Well, you become an egomaniac and start a cult. That's what happens.
Like that. That's exactly
right.
I got myself a great therapist who has no issue saying, you're so full of shit right now. You need to like check yourself. It's like, I need someone who's going to call me on my shit. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about the term wounded healer?
I mean, this might be controversial, but there is no not being wounded.
It's not controversial in this house.
We're all wounded in some way or another. Yeah, there's no way we don't get out alive,
right?
But we also don't get past the very first seconds of existence without something, which can sound really, I don't mean it to sound, what is the word? Nietzsche. What is Nietzsche? Fatalistic? Or cynical or whatever. I don't mean it to sound that way. I think that it's a portal into really being able to connect truly with what this human experience is. And when we sit with our wounds, when we hold our wounds, when we learn how to really embrace them and love them as a way to move through it, I think that we also I have certainly gained a deeper understanding of what love is and what compassion is and how hard it is. How often do we struggle with, like, I'll be compassionate with you all day long, but shit, why can't I just get over this goddamn thing, right? Like we're so hard on ourselves. And I think that it becomes an opportunity for really embodying what healing really is, which is embracing and loving and dancing in response to something, as opposed to let me beat it out of myself, or let me try to like numb it out of myself, or let me pretend that it doesn't exist. And meanwhile, it's acting out in different ways. So yeah, there's no healing without a wound, and that both those things need to be embodied, I think, at once. And we don't have to try because it's just there.
Right. It's just there. Yeah. Well, what you said kind of reminds me of the difference between, and this is very simplistic, but the difference between Buddhism and Christianity, and the way, like, I guess a more sort of evangelical look at Christianity is like, I need to be like Jesus so that I can be perfect and go to heaven, you know, whereas Buddhism is like, we suffer, right? And we all do have perfection inside us already. Right. And it's less about trying to attain, which is all capitalistic, right? Obtain perfection. Yeah. The belief that we are because of our wounds, because this is the human experience.
And all that can exist at the same time.
Right. Yeah. But not when you're conditioned to think black and white and concretely, which is what capitalism has tried to do to make us more like productive.
Oh my God. But also I think it keeps us in this pliant and easily submissive stance, right? It's very oppressive because if I'm constantly having to look outside of myself for the template for what I'm supposed to be, there's never opportunity or space allowed for what really exists here. What am I really? And what does this human experience really have that black and white's never going to give you? Right? Like and it's fucking exhausting. I don't understand anymore how this is like, do you know what I mean? The more I talk about this, not just with you, but just in general, it's like, are we not just fucking tired? Like, this is just, it's crazy making. It's yeah. And so on top of the wounds that we're trying to pretend that we don't have, we're just heaping on more and more and more and then inflicting each other with it.
Right. I mean, that very concretely reminds me of like the politicians who are so anti-gay, and then it comes out later that they were having homosexual relationships the whole time. Like,
yeah, it's like, Jesus. Dude, this is so textbook at this point.
Right?
How many decades have we understood this now? I know it's. And now you just have the clock. It's like, okay, let's give him a couple months or a year.
Right. Right.
He'll be released of his delusions, or she, whoever, they.
Right. Right.
It's like, although if you're they, you're probably completely past that whole issue.
Right. Like you've done some more work. Yeah. Well, that's actually, bringing gender into this because, talking about Lilith, talking about like the feminine archetypes and whatnot, how have you woven or shifting into understanding more non-binary, like ways of existing in the world? How do you weave that into your work?
That's a good question. I think I'm definitely still a student in terms of my understanding. I'm coming from a really deeply feminine only background. Like my teaching 20, 30 years, I can't remember this, 30 years ago, oh my God, was very deeply woven in women's space only and only women. And there was a reason for that. There was a deep healing in that. And so I'm certainly still a student. I think that one of the ways that I have incorporated it into what I'm doing is returning it back to you and to the body and to your personal expression and honoring that as divine for whatever it might be. There are obviously particular issues, right, that apply to someone who's non-binary as opposed to someone who identifies as feminine or masculine and I haven't gone very deep into those particular issues. But that's coming, right? Because Lilith for me is there is a particular life experience that happens when you are born in a female body. You are projected onto from the second that you come out of the womb, and sometimes before you come out of the womb. There's a very particular experience there. And Lilith speaks very strongly to what that is over the course of that life and that developmental arc. But she comes with a lot of information and a lot of healing and a lot of, I think, code in terms of how to embody liberation that transcends gender as well. And it's really important because of the fact that we all are so imprisoned by patriarchy. We've internalized it so much that even the capacity to really accept who you are, honor who you are, embody who you are fully has been, in a lot of ways, wrested from all of us. We've got to claw that back because of, the system that we live in. So that's where I'm at with it now. I feel like at this point, I'm just an eternal student of the process. Because certainly I don't know anything. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. Well, I've had this idea because I feel like part of what all humans are being asked to shift into is a space where we can hold duality more softly and with less boundaries. And in that way, I think that trans people are the future. And I'm not saying like we're all going to become trans, but I think that there is a transcendence, pun intended, right?
Look what you did.
I'm so ridiculous. Right. But that transcendence and having trans people be more visible now than I think they've ever been before in history, probably. Right. That's another way that people who are so entrenched in patriarchal systems are challenged just by trans people's existence. So I think, without being cheesy about it, I think that is part of our evolution of humanity.
There's change. There's big, big change stirring. And I think that is part of what, when I'm feeling incredibly negative about it all, like, oh my God, this is all just burning to the ground. And it's all, it's the realization that this always happens, right? When we're on that cusp, because it's just been stirring and stirring. And now we're colliding with these things that we just really need to face and let go and let transform. And there's a lot of fear around that. Just like there's a lot of fear around witchcraft, right? And being empowered and wielding your agency for change.
Yeah, the thing that I keep trying to go back to when I get in those spaces of like, the world is ending, it's all over. There was this book called The Fourth Turning. Have you ever heard of this?
Oh, no.
Anybody talk about it? It was written in the 90s. I can email it to you too, but
yeah, please, because I can't find a pen.
Yeah, it was written in the 90s by these historians, and they went back to the dawn of human civilization and looked at patterns and realized that essentially give or take, 10, 15 years, every 100 years, we go through all 4 seasons. And they talk about that cyclical nature.
Yeah.
Right?
I've heard this before. Yeah.
Yeah. We're in winter, right? We are in the dead of winter. Things have to die in order for spring to come. And it's just really painful to be in this right now, right? You're Gen X too? Is that right? Yeah.
Forever and ever.
Right? Like our generation is, and I'm literally the last year of Gen X. So like cute. I'm really a Zennial in that in between space. But there's something like, each generation has a task, so to speak, within, each season. And like our task is basically we get skipped over, right? So not only as Gen Xers, but like where we were born in the season. It's so fascinating. Yeah. It's worth checking out because there's even a page in the book where he talks about, he goes forward and he's like, in the 2010, 2020, we might see pandemics, we might see fascist leaders, we might see another world war. It's just like, you fucking nailed it, and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But it makes me feel better that it's predictable,
Yeah, kind of. Because, we look back on history. Yeah. I'm not familiar with the book, but this idea has come up, and I'm trying to remember who wrote about it. Because we talked about this book and it was an author that we actually had show up for one of our lives. But I hear you and I know this idea and I look back on history. And when you can look back on history, you can say, okay, they were going through it, right? When we had Hitler and the world wars. This was some planetary catastrophic horrors were going on. And now that we're past it, it's like, wow, that was really bad. But I put myself in those shoes. Like, if you're in the middle of that, man, that is some heavy. And so I just want to be here for like the come through. I'm very greedy about, it's very unspiritual of me, and I don't really care. I really want to be here for as long as humanly possible because I love it. But yeah, I would like for us to get through it a little bit, just to have a little moment on the other side, because it's the pain. There's so much pain. Yes. We're leading with pain, and we're creating more pain, and life is so beautiful. Like, there's no reason. There's no reason.
Yeah. Right. Well, what gives you hope?
Conversations like this.
Yeah.
I am a raging introvert, but these things is what juices me. Like, I love when you just get a moment to be in the truth. Hope. What else gives me hope? This is such a like me answer, but food gives me hope. Good food. And I think that the people, when you're in those moments with the people that you love the most, you know, there's something about that microcosm that I just want to amplify everywhere, because it's like when you're just in that simplicity, it's very sweet and it all makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to take that and hopefully we can cover the world with it.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. Do you want to tell people where they find you?
Okay. So you can find me on theholywitch.com. And most of our social media is theholywitch.com, although there's one or two that are still the Witches box because we couldn't get theholywitch.com or the Holy Witch. And then I've got personal social media that I really very rarely frequent, but it's Elena Rego, Rego. And yeah, that's where you can find us.
And yeah, join the Holy Witch, and I'll be at the meetings. Yeah.
So the Holy Witch has got a couple things going on. I don't know when this is going to go out, but we've got the School of Holy Witchery, which is an ongoing thing where you can learn not just how to create spells, but really how to live a really introspective, connected spiritual life. And we have a coven to Lilith. It'll open up every year around June and July. Okay. And then it'll be a closed cohort. And that's it. Yeah, that's what we're doing. Lots of magic and witchery. Yeah.
I appreciate you. And I'm so, talk about the gifts of social media. I remember and this is really funny because my grandma was super Catholic, but when she died, I was like, I got a bunch of money from her. And I was like, I'm going to use this for witchcraft. And I went on whatever Facebook witch group I was on. And I'm like, okay, what are the best witchy subscription boxes? And yours came up multiple times. And that's how I found you. So thanks, dead grandma, for the money that I felt like I could then spend on witchcraft. And she rolls in her grave.
Or let's reframe that. Maybe it's just that, you've created a portal for her to finally look at other things because she's still around.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Let's hope. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Well, thank you for being here. I adore you, and sharing space with you is just it. As cheesy as it is, it's magical.
It is magical. Thank you so much. I love that we did this. I would have done it for another 2 hours, actually. So fun. Thank you for this wonderful afternoon.
Well, you are welcome back anytime.
Okay. Wonderful. All right.
Thanks to our guest for an amazing conversation today. To find out more about today's guest, you can visit www.headheartbiztherapy.com/podcast.
You can find Sarah at Head Heart Biz Therapy on Facebook and Instagram.
And you can find Anne at Spare Room Wellness or spareroomwellness.com.
Thanks as always to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, to Liam O'Donnell for the album art, and to Ben Mueller for our theme music. Until next time, bye-bye.